Ambassador Taemin walked slowly through the cold metal halls of the massive space station. The walls were silver and smooth, but they felt like prison bars to him. 3 years he had spent in this place, 3 long years of sitting at tables with aliens who looked at humans like they were bugs. The station was bigger than any city on Earth. It floated in space between the stars and belonged to the Galactic Empire. Millions of aliens lived here from hundreds of different worlds. Some had 6 arms, some had no arms at all, some were tall as trees, others were small as children, but they all had one thing in common. They all thought humans were nothing special. Taemin stopped at a window and looked out at the stars. His reflection stared back at him, an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He remembered when he first came here, full of hope for his people. Earth had just learned they were not alone in the universe. The discovery of faster-than-light travel had opened the galaxy to humanity, but the galaxy already had rulers. The Galactic Empire controlled most of the known worlds. They had been expanding for thousands of years, swallowing up planet after planet. Some worlds joined willingly, others were forced to submit. The Empire called it bringing peace and order to the galaxy, but Taemin had seen what their peace really looked like. His Ji-woo approached quietly. She was young, maybe 30, with bright, intelligent eyes that reminded him of his daughter back on Earth. She carried a tablet full of reports about the latest negotiations. None of the news was good. Today is the big day, she said softly. The final session. Taemin nodded without turning from the window. He knew what waited for him in that chamber. The same arrogant faces, the same dismissive voices, the same impossible demands. The Empire wanted humanity to give up everything that made them free. The walk to the negotiation chamber felt like walking to his own execution. Guards flanked the hallways. Tall reptilian creatures with weapons that could turn a human to ash in seconds. They watched him pass with cold eyes that showed no emotion, no respect. The chamber was enormous, with seats rising up in circles like an ancient amphitheater. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in those seats, all of them staring down at the small human delegation at the center. It was designed to make visitors feel small, and it worked. Council leader Vextar sat on the highest platform. His species looked like giant spiders, but walked on 2 legs. His 8 eyes could look in different directions at once, and right now they were all focused on Taemin with obvious contempt. The other council members were equally impressive and equally terrifying. The Korthak delegate had skin like black rock and breathed fire. When he spoke, the Zephyrian representative floated in the air, surrounded by crackling energy. Even the smallest aliens in the room had technologies that could destroy Earth without breaking a Swedeman took his seat at the defendant's table because that was what it really was. He was not here as an equal. He was here to receive judgment from his betters. At least that was how the Empire saw it. The terms are simple. Vextar began, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Your species will surrender all military vessels to Imperial control. Your homeworld Earth will accept a resident governor appointed by the Empire. Your population growth will be limited to levels we deem appropriate. Taemin had heard these demands before, but they still made his stomach turn. The Empire wanted to make humanity into pets, kept in a comfortable cage, but pets. Nonetheless, in return, Vextar continued, you will receive our protection, access to some of our trade routes, and the privilege of serving the greater galactic community under our guidance. These are generous terms considering your species' primitive nature. The word primitive stung. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel, developed clean energy, and cured most diseases, but to these aliens they were still savages who needed to be controlled. What about our colonies? Taemin asked. His voice sounded small in the huge chamber. The 17 human settlements beyond Earth would be evacuated. Vextar replied casually, as if he was discussing the weather. Your species lacks the wisdom to govern multiple worlds. Centralized control on your homeworld will be much more efficient. 17 worlds full of families and dreams and people who had left Earth to build something new. All of it would be abandoned because the Empire said so. Taemin felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his face calm. And our technology, he asked, any technology deemed advanced will be transferred to Imperial control for the good of the galaxy. The aliens around the chamber made sounds that might have been laughter. Your medical knowledge will be useful to us. Your energy systems show promise, but such power cannot be trusted. In primitive hands, Taemin looked around the chamber at the hundreds of faces staring down at him. Not one showed sympathy or understanding. They saw humans as children playing with toys. Too dangerous for them to keep. We have been negotiating for 3 years, he said slowly. Every proposal we make you reject, every compromise we offer you dismiss. Tell me, Council Leader, why should we continue these talks if you have already decided our fate? Vex. Tar leaned forward, his 8 eyes narrowing. Because the alternative is much worse for your species, he said softly. The Empire has been patient with you longer than we have been with most worlds. But our patience has limits. The threat was clear: submit or be destroyed. It was the same choice the Empire had given to thousands of other worlds throughout history. Most chose submission, a few chose destruction, none had ever chosen a third option behind him. Jiwoo whispered, Sir, the Earth Council is waiting for your report. They need to know what decision. To Makita, Min closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green fields, about children playing in parks who had never seen the cold metal walls of an alien space station. He thought about the colonies, about brave families who had crossed the void to build new homes among the stars. When he opened his eyes, something had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by something else, something that made Vextar sit back slightly in his chair. We reject your terms, Taemin said clearly. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens chittered and roared and made sounds no human throat could produce. But Vextar raised one clawed hand and silence fell instantly. You reject our generous offer? He asked with disbelief. Taemin stood, slowly gathering the papers from his table. Jiwoo stared at him with wide eyes, but she began packing their materials without question. We came here seeking partnership, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We offered trade, friendship, cooperation. Instead, you offer us chains painted gold. You speak of our primitive nature, but what is primitive about wanting to be free? Vex. Tar laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your freedom is an illusion, little human. The galaxy belongs to the strong. Your species will learn this lesson, whether you accept our terms today or learn it the hard way later. Then we choose the hard way, Taemin said. He turned toward the exit with Jiwoo beside him. The council leader called after them, Run back to your little world, humans. When you grow hungry enough, when your people cry out for the prosperity we offer, you will return on your knees, begging for our mercy. Taemin never looked back. As he walked through the chamber doors, he could hear the aliens behind him still laughing, still mocking, but he felt something he had not felt in 3 years. He felt hope. The news hit Earth like a thunderstorm. Prime Minister Sora stood in her office in Seoul, watching the screens that showed crowds gathering in every major city. Some people cheered and waved flags, others looked scared and worried. The decision to walk away from the Empire had split humanity right down the middle. Her communication device buzzed with calls from world leaders. Everyone wanted to know what came next. The Empire controlled the biggest trade routes in the galaxy. They had technology that could make planets rich or destroy them completely. Walking away from their offer seemed like madness to many people, but Sora remembered her grandfather who had fought for Korean independence decades ago. He used to tell her that freedom was worth more than gold, more than safety, more than an easy life. She understood why Taemin had walked away from those talks. The Prime Minister called an emergency meeting with the Earth Council representatives from every nation packed into the great hall in Geneva. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew that humanity had just made the biggest gamble in their history. We have a choice, Sora said as she stood before the assembly. We can send Ambassador Taemin back to beg for mercy, or we can prove that humans deserve respect. The Empire thinks we are weak, primitive creatures who will come crawling back when things get harder. Representative from the American Federation stood up. What about our colonies? Prime Minister 17 worlds full of our people. What happens to them when the Empire cuts off all trade and support? That question hung in the air like a dark cloud. The colonies were humanity's greatest achievement. Brave families had left Earth to build new lives among the stars, but now they were cut off, trapped in space with limited supplies and no help coming. Captain Donghaen commanded the colony ship New Seoul when the news arrived. His ship carried 200 families to establish a settlement in the Kepler system. It was supposed to be a routine mission, but everything had changed. Reported his navigator Hyjin, the Empire has banned all human ships from using their hyperspace routes. We are officially cut off from the trade networks. The captain looked at his crew, young men and women who had volunteered for this dangerous mission. They had signed up to explore the unknown, but none of them expected to be completely abandoned. In deep space, how long can we survive on our current supplies? He asked his chief engineer. Minho checked his calculations. Maybe 6 months if we are careful. But that assumes everything works perfectly, no equipment failures, no accidents, no emergencies. 6 months to find a miracle or watch 200 people die slowly in the cold emptiness of space. It seemed impossible, but Dong Hyan had not given up hope yet. Something about this situation felt different, like the universe was offering them a chance if they were brave enough to take it. Captain Haijin called out excitedly, "I am detecting unusual energy readings from the third planet in this system. The readings do not match anything in Empire database." Dong Hyan moved to her station and studied the data. The planet showed signs of rare elements that could revolutionize space travel, elements the Empire had never discovered because they only explored systems along their established trade routes. "Stake us closer," he ordered. What they found changed everything. The planet was rich with quantum crystals, materials that could make faster than light travel, cheaper and more efficient than anything the Empire used. More importantly, they were not alone in this unexplored region of space. The Keth Mori had also refused to submit to the Empire. Their proud warrior culture would not accept alien rule, so they had been driven to the outer edges of the galaxy where the Empire claimed nothing valuable existed. War Chief Theklan was a massive alien with 4 arms and skin like armor. His people had been fighting the Empire for 50 years, always losing, always retreating, but never giving up. When he heard about the humans who had walked away from the peace talks, he was curious. The meeting happened on a barren moon between the human and Keth Mori fleets. Both sides came armed, but neither wanted a fight. They had a common enemy, and that made them potential allies. "Your people have courage," Theklan said in broken human language. "Most species accept Empire rule quickly. You chose the hard path." Why? Captain Dong Hyan thought carefully before answering. "Freedom is worth fighting for," he said, "even if the fight seems impossible." War Chief made a sound that might have been laughter or approval. "We thought we were alone in our rebellion. It seems we were wrong." Meanwhile, back on Earth, genius engineer Minsu worked day and night in his laboratory. The Empire thought they could starve humanity into submission by cutting off access to their hyperspace routes. But Minsu had a different idea. "If we cannot use their roads," he told his team, "then we build better roads." His breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. After weeks of failed experiments, quantum tunneling technology could create temporary wormholes through space. Ships could travel instantly between any 2 points without using the Empire established hyperspace lanes. The first successful test made Minsu want to cry with joy. A small probe disappeared from his lab and reappeared on the other side of the solar system. In less than a second, it was crude and dangerous, but it worked. Dr. Sujin ran the medical research facility in Seoul. When the Empire blockade began, she faced a terrible choice. Her team had been working on cures for diseases that affected multiple alien species. The Empire had promised to share this research with the galaxy in exchange for human submission. Now, that promise was worthless. But Sujin realized something important. They still had the research, the cures that could save millions of lives across the galaxy were stored in human computers, not Empire databases. She made a decision that would change everything. Instead of keeping the medical advances secret, she began broadcasting them freely to any species that wanted them. No payment required, no political strings attached, just free medical knowledge for anyone who needed. The response was incredible. Species the Empire had never told humans about began reaching out, grateful for the life-saving information. The Irintel had been dying from a plague for decades until they received Sujin broadcast. They were master shipbuilders who could construct vessels faster than any Empire factory. The Valdris were ancient beings who lived at the very edge of the galaxy. They had watched the Empire expansion with growing concern, but had never interfered. Now they sent a message to Earth expressing interest in meeting these humans who shared knowledge freely. Ambassador Taemin found himself busier than ever. Instead of begging for scraps at Empire tables, he was coordinating with dozens of species that most humans had never heard of. They lived beyond the Empire borders in regions marked as empty space on official maps. But the space was not empty, it was full of civilizations that had chosen independence over submission. They had technologies the Empire could not imagine, and they were very interested in meeting the species that had dared to say no to galactic tyranny. The Empire intelligence services began filing disturbing reports. Human ships were appearing in sectors that should have been unreachable. Their technology was advancing at impossible speeds. Worst of all, other species were starting to ask questions about Independence Council leader Vexstar. Read the reports with growing unease. The humans were supposed to come crawling back begging for mercy. Instead, they seemed to be thriving in exile. They were forming alliances, building new technologies, and inspiring other species to consider rebellion. This was not how things were supposed to work. The Empire had crushed thousands of species over the millennia. None had ever succeeded in building an alternative to their rule. But the humans were not playing by the established rules. They were writing new ones. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Empire peace talks. The galaxy had changed in ways that shocked even the most experienced alien observers. Human ships now appeared in sectors that were supposed to be impossible to reach. Without Empire navigation permits, Ambassador Taman was no longer begging for scraps at alien tables. Instead, he was forming alliances with species the Empire had never even heard of. The reports reaching Emperor Zekthal throne world were disturbing. His intelligence officers spoke of human colonies thriving in the outer rim regions that the Empire had marked as worthless, empty space. But the space was not empty at all. It was full of advanced civilizations that had been hiding from the Empire. For thousands of years, Council leader Vexstar stood before the Emperor with documents that made no sense according to everything they knew about galactic politics. The humans have made contact with the outer rim civilizations, he reported with obvious confusion. Species we thought were myths or extinct are now part of some kind of alliance network. How is this possible? The Emperor demanded. The outer rim is a wasteland of dead stars and empty planets. We surveyed those regions centuries ago. We surveyed the easy regions, Vexstar admitted reluctantly. The area is accessible through our hyperspace routes, but the humans are using some kind of new technology. They can reach places we never explored because we assumed they were not worth the effort. They are. Young A worked in a medical facility on the colony world humans called Harmony. The planet was beautiful with purple skies and silver trees, but it was also dangerous. A deadly plague had been killing the native Irintel species for decades. The Empire had known about the plague, but considered the Irintel too primitive to be worth saving. Young A saw the situation differently. She was a doctor and sick people needed help regardless of their species or political value. She spent months studying the plague, working 18-hour days to understand how it attacked Irintel biology. The breakthrough came when she realized the plague was actually an engineered weapon. Created by an extinct species millions of years ago, it was designed to target specific genetic markers that the Irintel possessed. But Young A found a way to rewrite the genetic code, making the Irintel immune to the ancient weapon. The cure spread through their population like wildfire. Within weeks, the dying species was healthy again. The Irintel were so grateful they offered humanity something the Empire would have killed for access to their manufacturing technology. Irintel could build starships faster than any other known species. Their automated factories could produce 1,000 vessels in the time it took Empire shipyards to build one. But they had always refused to share this technology with outsiders until the humans saved their entire civilization. Coordinator Moldick spoke for his species when he met with Young A. The Empire knew of our plague for 50 years, he said with obvious emotion. They offered to help only if we became their slaves. You offered help because it was the right thing to do. There is a difference, Captain. Sung Ho commanded the exploration vessel Courage when it made the most shocking discovery in human history. His ship was equipped with the new quantum tunneling drive that allowed them to reach areas no Empire vessel had ever seen. They were mapping the galaxy edge when they found something impossible. The readings show massive energy signatures. Sung Ho reported to his crew cities the size of moons. Ships that dwarf anything the Empire has ever built. This is not empty space. This is the most advanced civilization we have ever encountered. The Valdris Collective had been watching the galaxy for millions of years. They were ancient beyond human understanding and possessed technology that seemed like magic. They had seen the Empire rise and expand, always wondering when someone would finally challenge. The tyrant's elder Kasthin met with Sung Ho on a station that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humans had no names for. The meeting place was beautiful. and terrifying at the same time, filled with lights that moved like living things. Your species has potential, the elder said in a voice that sounded like music and thunder at the same time. You remind us of ourselves long ago before we learn that true strength comes from unity, not domination. Sun Ho felt very small sitting across from a being that had lived longer than human civilization had existed. But Kasdan treated him with respect as an equal, not a primitive creature the Empire believes. The galaxy belongs to them, the elder continued, but they are children playing with toys they do not understand. We have been waiting for someone to show them the truth, someone like humanity. Meanwhile, Empire intelligence networks were finally beginning to understand the scope of their mistake. The humans had not retreated in defeat. They had gone where the Empire was afraid to go and found allies the Empire never knew existed. Admiral Kurtan read the latest reports with growing alarm. The human alliance now included dozens of species, many with technology superior to anything the Empire possessed. The quantum tunneling drives made Empire hyperspace routes obsolete. The medical advances were attracting species from across the galaxy. The manufacturing capabilities could produce fleets faster than the Empire could count them, but the most frightening discovery was the Valdris. Collective Empire historians had found references to them in ancient texts, but assumed they were legends. Stories told by a primitive species about gods who lived among the stars. Now it seemed the gods were real, and they were backing humanity. Your Majesty, Admiral Kurtan reported to Emperor Zekthul, we may have made a serious error in our assessment of the human threat. They are not the primitive species we believe them to be. Emperor sat on his throne, made from the bones of conquered enemies, and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The humans were supposed to come back, begging for mercy. Instead, they were leading a revolution that threatened everything the Empire had built. How many ships do they have now? He asked. Conservative estimates suggest they could field 10,000 vessels within 6 months. The admiral replied, most using technology we do not understand. Crude by species, we have never encountered 10,000 ships. The Empire fleet numbered 8,000, and most of those were scattered across the galaxy, maintaining control over hundreds of worlds. Bringing them together for a major battle would leave the Empire territories defenseless and their technology superior to ours in most categories. The Admiral admitted the quantum drives give them tactical advantages we cannot match. Their medical technology is attracting allies faster than we can track them. Their manufacturing capabilities exceed our own by significant margins. Emperor Zekthul felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. The Empire had ruled through strength and intimidation for thousands of years. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology or exceed their numbers. What do you recommend? He asked Whitley. The Admiral hesitated before answering. Negotiation, Your Majesty. The humans have proven they are not the primitive species we believed. Perhaps it is time to discuss terms. The word negotiation tasted bitter in the Emperor's mouth. He had built his empire by forcing others to submit, not by treating them as equals. But the reports were clear. Humanity and their allies were no longer the desperate refugees who had been rejected at the peace talks. They had become something the Empire had never faced before, a force that could not be intimidated or conquered, a collection of free species who chose cooperation over domination, and they were coming. The attack came without warning. Zephyr Confederacy ships appeared out of nowhere using quantum tunneling technology that made Empire sensors useless. One moment the border system of Kolvar was peaceful, the next moment it was under assault by vessels that should not have been able to reach it. Admiral Kyungsik stood on the bridge of his flagship Defiance, watching the battle unfold on holographic displays. Around him worked a crew that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Humans, Kethmori, Irintel, Valdris, and a dozen other species, all working together with perfect coordination. The Empire response was exactly what they had expected. Overwhelming force applied without strategy or subtlety. 300 Imperial warships dropped out of hyperspace expecting to crush a small rebel fleet. Instead, they found a carefully planned trap. Now, Admiral Kyungsik said calmly, quantum tunnels opened throughout the system as human alliance ships appeared from every direction. The Empire vessels found themselves surrounded by enemies using technology they did not understand, weapons they could not counter, and tactics they had never seen. Before the battle was over in 20 minutes, not because the Empire ships were destroyed, but because they surrendered. Imperial crews had been trained to fight rebels and pirates, not organized fleets with superior technology. The sight of their most advanced battleships being disabled by single shots from Alliance vessels broke their will to fight. Captain Hayone commanded the assault on the Empire mining facility on Keltar. Her mixed-species crew moved through the installation like ghosts, disabling security systems and freeing enslaved workers. The Empire had built their wealth on the backs of conquered peoples, but that era was ending. Remember, she told her troops over the communication system, "We are here to free people, not conquer them. Every being we liberate is a victory against tyranny." The liberated workers joined the Alliance willingly. Species that had suffered under Empire rule for generations suddenly saw hope for the first time. Workers became soldiers, administrators became spies. Imperial control began crumbling from within as more and more beings chose freedom over security. General Nari planned the ground operations from her mobile command center. Her forces used hit-and-run tactics that drove Empire commanders to madness. They would strike supply convoys, free prison camps, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The Empire military had been designed to crush open rebellion and occupy conquered territories. They had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to hold ground or present clear targets. Alliance forces were everywhere and nowhere, impossible to pin down or defeat through conventional means. Planet after planet declared independence from the Empire. Local governors found themselves facing populations that no longer feared imperial punishment. The Alliance offered protection and membership to any world that chose freedom over servitude. Emperor Zekthal watched his empire dissolve from his throne room on the capital. World reports flooded in hourly of new defeats, new rebellions, new worlds lost to the growing Alliance. Half his territory was in open revolt, and the other half was questioning their loyalty. How did we not see this coming? He demanded of his advisors' council. Leader Vextar stood before his emperor with his confidence completely shattered. "The humans were never trying to join us, Your Majesty. They were studying us, learning our weaknesses, while we ignored their strength." The terrible truth was becoming clear. The Empire had grown comfortable with easy victories. They had forgotten how to fight enemies who refused to follow the established rules of galactic warfare. Every species they had conquered before had tried to match them strength for strength and failed, but humanity had chosen a different path. They had found allies in places the Empire considered worthless. They had developed technologies the Empire thought impossible. They had built an alliance based on mutual respect rather than fear and domination. Were chief Bekelen led Kethmori forces in the liberation of his species' homeworld. The planet had been under Empire control for 50 years, its population enslaved in mining operations that stripped the world of its resources. "Today, we take back what was stolen from us," he roared to his warriors. "Today we show the galaxy that the Empire can be defeated." The battle for the Kethmori homeworld became a symbol of the Alliance success. Imperial forces that should have easily crushed the rebels instead found themselves outmatched by opponents who knew every mountain, every canyon, every hiding place. The Arsujin medical broadcasts had created a network of grateful species across the galaxy. When the Empire tried to cut off her transmissions, they discovered that dozens of civilizations were now retransmitting the signals. The medical knowledge had become impossible to suppress. More importantly, her broadcasts had revealed something the Empire had tried to hide. Many of the diseases affecting Outer Rim species were not natural. They were biological weapons deployed by the Empire to weaken potential threats and maintain control. The revelations sparked outrage across the galaxy. Species that had been neutral in the conflict suddenly demanded answers. The Empire had been secretly poisoning entire populations for centuries while presenting themselves as benevolent protectors. Ambassador Taemin found himself busier than ever coordinating diplomatic efforts across dozens of star system. Species that had never communicated with each other were now working together, united by their shared desire for freedom from imperial rule. The Alliance was not just a military force. It was becoming a new form of galactic government based on cooperation rather than conquest. Each member species retained their independence, while contributing to the common defense. Captain Dong Haiyan now commanded a fleet of exploration vessels mapping regions of space. The Empire had never bothered to explore. They were finding resources and civilizations that changed the balance of power. With each discovery, the quantum crystal mines in the Kepler system were producing materials faster than the Alliance could use them. The Irintal factories were building ships around the clock, crewed by volunteers from liberated worlds. The Valdris were sharing technology that made Empire weapons seem primitive. But perhaps most importantly, humanity had proven something that every oppressed species in the galaxy had hoped was true. The Empire could be defeated. Their rule was not inevitable. Freedom was possible for any people brave enough to fight for a Emperor. Zekthal faced a choice that no previous emperor had ever confronted. His military advisors painted a grim picture. The rebels controlled superior technology, vast resources, and the loyalty of countless populations ready to rise up against imperial rule. The Empire, that had seemed eternal just 5 years ago, was now fighting for its very survival against enemies it had created through its own arrogance and cruelty. And at the center of it all were the humans, the primitive species that had walked away from the peace table and returned, leading a revolution that threatened to remake the entire galaxy. The massive fleet that appeared at the edge of the Empire capital system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 ships from 50 different species, all flying under the banner of the Galactic Alliance. The vessels ranged from sleek human cruisers to massive Keth Mori battleships to Valdris craft that seemed to bend reality. Around them, Admiral Taeyong stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, watching the Empire homeworld grow larger on the main screen. 5 years ago, he had been a junior officer on a small exploration vessel. Now he commanded the largest fleet in galactic history, united not by conquest but by choice. Sir, reported his communications officer, we are receiving surrender signals from the outer defense platforms. The Empire garrison is requesting terms. The Admiral nodded calmly. He had expected this. The Empire military was brave, but they were not stupid. The sight of the Alliance fleet had made it clear that resistance would only lead to unnecessary death and destruction. Open a channel to the surface, he ordered. Emperor Zekthal sat in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who looked as defeated as he felt. The reports from the fleet admirals were all the same. The Alliance possessed overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. Any attempt to fight would result in the complete destruction of the Empire. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing a human face that Zekthal recognized with bitter irony. It was Admiral Taeyong, the brother of the ambassador, who had walked away from the peace talks 5 years ago. Your Majesty, the Admiral said with respectful formality, I bring greetings from the Galactic Alliance and an offer of peace. The Emperor almost laughed at the reversal. Now the humans were offering him terms instead of begging for mercy. How had everything changed so completely? The Empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was now at the mercy of species they had dismissed as primitive. What are your terms? He asked quietly. The doors to the throne room opened. An ambassador Taemin walked in, flanked by representatives from dozens of Alliance species. The same man who had been humiliated in the Empire Council chambers now entered as an equal, negotiating from a position of strength. We offer recognition of sovereignty, Taemin said simply. Each species in the galaxy has the right to govern itself free from outside interference. The age of empire is ending, but the age of cooperation can begin. President Sora stepped forward, representing not just humanity but the entire Alliance structure that had grown from those first desperate days after the withdrawal from peace talks. She was no longer just the leader of one small planet, but the elected representative of hundreds of worlds. Our terms are simple, she said. Free passage through space for all peoples. Open borders for trade and exploration. No species shall be forced into servitude by another. The galaxy belongs to all who call it home. Thul looked around the room at the alien faces that had once bowed before his throne. Now they stood as equals, offering partnership instead of demanding submission. The irony was not lost on him. And if we refuse, he asked, then you will face the consequences of your choices. Admiral Taeyong replied, but we hope you will choose peace. The galaxy has seen enough war, enough suffering. The Alliance offers a better way forward. The negotiations took place over several days in the same chamber where humanity had been rejected years earlier, but now the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of arrogant demands and dismissive laughter, there was careful discussion and mutual respect. The Empire leaders gradually realized they were not being offered the same humiliating terms they had once demanded from others. The Alliance wanted cooperation, not conquest. They were willing to allow the Empire to maintain control over their core worlds as long as they stopped expanding and enslaving other species. Council leader Vextar found himself in the strange position of negotiating with beings he had once mocked. The humans showed no desire for revenge despite having every right to demand it. Instead, they focused on building a framework for peaceful coexistence. The signing ceremony took place on neutral ground, a new station built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from across the galaxy watched as the old Empire formally recognized the Alliance authority over half the known worlds, but more importantly, they signed agreements that established basic rights for all sentient beings. The right to self-governance, the right to free travel, the right to peaceful trade, the right to refuse unwanted interference from outside powers. Emperor Zekthal, no longer called himself Emperor, found that the new arrangement was not as terrible as he had feared. The Empire worlds that remained under his control were actually more prosperous without the massive military expenses required to maintain an unwilling empire. The Alliance offered trade partnerships, technological exchanges, and mutual defense agreements. The former Empire worlds discovered that cooperation was more profitable than conquest. Years passed, and the galaxy settled into a new rhythm. Children on 1,000 worlds learned about the day humanity walked away from the peace table and returned leading a revolution that changed everything. The story became legend, but the lesson was real. Never underestimate those who choose freedom over comfort. Those who walk away from unfair deals may return with better options. Those who refuse to submit may inspire others to stand up for themselves. Our Young A continued her medical research, now supported by scientists from dozens of species working together to cure diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Her breakthrough treatments saved millions of lives and proved that cooperation achieved more than competition. Captain Suho led exploration missions into the deepest regions of space, discovering new worlds and new civilizations that chose to join the Alliance freely. The galaxy was much larger and more diverse than the Empire had ever imagined. Engineer Minsu quantum tunneling technology became the foundation for a new era of galactic exploration. His invention made it possible for any species to reach any part of the galaxy, opening up opportunities that had been impossible under Empire rule. Ambassador Taemin established the diplomatic corps that helped resolve conflicts between species peacefully instead of conquest and submission. The galaxy learned to handle disagreements through negotiation and compromise. The Galactic Alliance grew stronger with each passing year, not through military force, but through the simple appeal of freedom and mutual respect. Species joined because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. The Empire greatest mistake had not been underestimating human military might or technological capability. Their greatest mistake was believing that intelligent beings would choose comfortable slavery over the uncertainty of freedom. Humanity had pulled away from the peace talks, but they had returned to create a lasting peace built on justice rather than fear. The galaxy learned that those who dare to say no to tyranny might return with friends who share their dream of freedom, and in the end that dream proved stronger than any empire.